All right, hello and welcome to this episode where we're going to talk about intrusive thoughts. And we're going to talk about specifically why intrusive thoughts are not the actual problem that you're trying to solve. And I know that sounds, kind of paradoxical or contrary because you might be watching this or listening to this with the very sole intention of I need to solve my intrusive thoughts. So I'm going to go into that. And I wanted to lead off this series and this mini course here on intrusive thoughts with this idea because I think it's so like what I'm about to cover here is so foundational and so important to your success that I would be remiss if I held this to the end of the program, right? Like this is what needs to be addressed first and foremost when we're talking about intrusive thoughts. So for those of you that don't know me, my name is Matt Cotty. I'm a licensed clinical social worker. I'm the founder of Restored Minds and the creator of the AAA Response. And if you're looking for help and guidance on your path to recovery from intrusive thoughts, OCD, and anxiety, please head over to restoredminds.com, right? We have some great resources to get you started. I have our whole Taking Back Control program, as well as my book and other resources to help you. And so we have some links down in the notes that will lead you directly there as well. And if you are benefiting from this and like this, please help us out by liking and subscribing and leaving a nice review on Spotify or iTunes because it just helps the algorithm of this and get this to more people. So let's go ahead and dive in as we begin this journey together. So intrusive thoughts. What is that, right? Well, really, it's a thought that, let's start off with kind of defining it. It's a thought that really kind of pops into your conscious awareness, so something that you become aware of, something that tends to happen automatically, meaning you're not purposely generating it. It tends to just pop up, and it's a thought that you perceive to be intrusive or not a reflection of what you want, what you prefer, or who you are as an individual. Now, these thoughts tend to fall into three main categories. Doesn't mean that's the only type of intrusive thoughts that exist. It just tends to be in these three categories. And as we go into this series together, we're going to talk about sub themes and sub experiences of intrusive thoughts to really, help you understand the different types that happen and normalize experiences of them. So the three main themes tend to be harmful, intrusive harmful thoughts, intrusive sexual thoughts, and intrusive thoughts related to one's faith or religion. And these can all obviously merge together in their own various ways as well. So why are intrusive thoughts not the actual problem? And let's kind of dive into what the actual problem is. So what most people, when they first experience intrusive thoughts, they get very reactive, right? Then they have a thought, what if XYZ, right? It might be a harmful thought, sexual thought, thought towards their faith or religion. And it's what if XYZ, and then they have this very intense internal reaction, generally fear, right? That follows. And so the initial concept is that the thought caused my fear. And then what follows is the natural, if I get rid of the thoughts, I'm no longer going to feel this emotion. And so what you have to understand is that the real thing that people with intrusive thoughts are generally seeking is not necessarily to get rid of thought, but they want to not feel the emotions that they're experiencing that are corresponding with these thoughts. And it's and more importantly then, so what they do is they do a bunch of different behaviors to try to make the thoughts stop or even suppress the emotions. And that paradoxically gets them in a loop where their brain produces more intrusive thoughts. They feel more anxiety or more uncomfortable sensations. They do more compulsions, and this loop forms. Okay. And I talk a lot about this in my book, From Stuck to Unstuck. So if you haven't gone through that yet, please do. On the site, I think this is like $6 for both the PDF version and the audiobook. You can also get it on Amazon as well. And so if you're so the logic is pretty sound from that perspective, right? When someone's like, okay, well, I'm having these thoughts. I don't like how I feel when I have these thoughts. I need to get rid of the thought. The issue is that anything we do to get rid of thought paradoxically perpetuates this, right? And this was shown. So things like thought suppression, rumination, thought replacement, thought blocking, all these different mental activities that we engage in to try to not have these intrusive thoughts paradoxically work against us, and they create more of the intrusive thoughts. Now, this was shown in research by Dr. Daniel Wegner back in the late 80s, early 90s. He did this whole series of experiments where he would have people try not to think of white bears, right? And he wrote a whole book that you can read. It was an interesting read, but you don't need to read it to understand this idea. But the book was called White Bears and Other Unwanted Thoughts. And what he determined in his research was this idea of the ironic process. And the ironic process is basically, or the ironic process theory, where the more you try not to think about a thought, the more that thought paradoxically surfaces in your mind. And he would have people come into these rooms and try to, teach them, or, the exercise was like, okay, for the next 10 minutes, don't think of a white bear. And they'd have to tally how many times they thought of white bears. And what happened is not only did they experience way more thought of white bears than they normally would had they not been given that prompt, but then after the exercise was over, they reported having continual thought of white bears, having dreams of white bears, right? And so the act of suppressing the thought paradoxically created more of those thoughts. So when you think your thoughts are the problem and you're trying to solve a thought problem, what's going to happen is a paradoxical result where you're going to try to stop thoughts. You're going to try to not have thoughts. You're going to be checking to see if the thoughts are there, indirectly actually creating more of them. And then therefore reacting to those thoughts like a problem even more, because you're going to experience them more, getting more anxious, doing more compulsions, finding yourself to be stuck in these loops. Now, again, it doesn't matter what the thought was, right? It's more along the lines of, because you're reacting to it and trying to get rid of it and trying to control it and doing all this stuff, the paradoxical event is that you experience it more. And the loop essentially gets more and more force behind it. You find yourself spending more and more time trying to stop and fight and control your thoughts. This is the experience of someone who's caught in this loop of intrusive thoughts. I mean, how do I know this? Because I was there at one point in my life, just totally lost in this world. And, I'm not going to go into it in this particular episode. I may a little later, but it's really the only reason I'm sharing that is just because it's relevant to understand that I've also lived through this and I know you can get out of this. That's really the whole point. I want to share my story right there. So the first step in overcoming intrusive thoughts is first realizing that the intrusive thought itself is not actually what you're trying to get rid of, and it's not the actual problem you're experiencing. The problem is the loop. And the paradox is if you try to get rid of the intrusive thoughts, may actually more than likely make them worse. And what you're actually looking for is to feel, right, a sense of peace and inner well-being. Because these thoughts are associated with these uncomfortable sensations you're experiencing, whether it's guilt, shame, fear, anger, right? These lower emotions that often accompany these intrusive thoughts are really the problem. And my evidence for that for you would be, you can probably look at an intrusive thought you've had in the past, like a what if thought, and have no emotional reaction to it and see it as just a thought, right? You're just like, oh yeah, this what if thought that used to bother me back when. That thought, you can actually have it into your conscious awareness, and it doesn't generate this emotional disturbance, and you can see it as just a thought. When the thoughts are corresponding with these really big emotional disturbances, the thing is that you really can't see the forest from the trees, and your desire really is to get rid of the emotional corresponding experience, not just the surface thought. You just currently believe that if I get rid of the thought, the emotion will subside, because you see it as this event that precedes the whole experience. And again, from a logic standpoint, that's exactly how I operated, and I tried to fight my thoughts for a long time, and I never got anywhere. And that's why I really want to stress on this particular episode, as we begin this series, that the thoughts are not actually the problem, right? This loop is what the problem is. And the way that we actually break the loop is by eliminating the behaviors we're doing that are actually perpetuating it, and actually learning how to feel and confront and release the lower emotions that we don't want to experience. Because ironically, it's our resistance to these experiences that are keeping us stuck. And so it's not the thoughts, it's not even the feelings, it's the resistance to these experiences that causes us to do behaviors that indirectly perpetuate them and then paradoxically keep us stuck in them. And if I was able to know that when I was 18 years old, man, I mean, that would have saved me a long, long journey. But it's okay, because going on that journey has helped me to really clarify this for myself in a way where I can teach others, and I get to help others experience this as well, or break free from these loops as well. And without going through that process, there's no way I would have as in-depth of an understanding as I do now. So, it's not something that I in many ways hold a certain sense of gratitude for going through this experience because of who I've become by going through it. And yeah, I mean, the main point that I want to take away from this first part here is just, again, the intrusive thoughts are actually not the problem that we're trying to solve. And when you really, and so you might hear that and say, okay, yeah, that's great. But you still, again, want the thoughts to go away. You still want, really listen to this point here and take this in. The intrusive thoughts are not the problem that we're trying to solve. And they're not even a problem in and of itself. The problem is the loop that forms and the compulsions that you engage in that paradoxically keep that loop going. So once you understand that we need to shift to break the loop, that's how we're going to really find freedom from this experience. Part of the issue is that we don't understand the problem correctly, and we're just trying to solve the wrong problem. By shifting our concept and our perception of the issue, we're then able to start integrating and actually applying techniques and tools that will really help you break the real problem that you're currently not seeing. So really hope this was helpful. I really hope you get what I'm saying in this episode, because it can fundamentally change your life if you're dealing with intrusive thoughts. And it can really, again, open up doors and possibilities for you that if you really pursue this path are going to be unavailable to you if you try to solve it from a thought problem perspective. So with that, hope this was helpful. And again, I look forward to seeing you on the next episode. And with that, I wish you a great day and a great week. And I look forward to seeing you soon. Hey there. So if you enjoyed that video, we've linked up a few more videos that we think you'd find helpful as well. And if you have found this helpful, we'd really appreciate your support by liking and subscribing. And if you're looking for help and guidance, please check out restoredminds.com, as we have several options for you to get started. See you guys soon.